Hi, I'm Kat Wildman, and welcome to the Powered by Diversity podcast. Today, we're joined by Solène Anglaret, and we're talking all about leaders, managers, and EDI. So much of the EDI narrative is around engaging leaders and training managers, but are we going about this with compassion and empathy for the pressures they're under, and perhaps the underlying reasons why they're not focusing on EDI as we would like them to? And in the conversation, we get all the way around to what you can do for managers that is completely free, and which actually I'm tempted to set up myself because I think it would be so amazing. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Solène. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a really interesting topic that we're going to talk about today because we're going to talk about leaders and EDI. And I wonder whether people have preconceived ideas about what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about, because as soon as leaders and EDI is mentioned, everyone immediately, I feel, takes an accusatory stance and they're like, yes, what are they going to do? But we're going to talk about compassion. So let's start with introducing yourself. So tell everybody who you are and what you do.
So, hi everybody. My name is Solène. I am a freelancer. I do consulting, writing, public speaking, and facilitating, mainly around the topics of neurodiversity and mental health. Prior to that, I've spent more than 12 years in various different roles, startups, corporate environment, and government. I have been myself a leader in a large organization. I've built teams and I've also been an EDI professional. So I've got all those kinds of different angles that I'd love to bring to the conversation today. And maybe just to add that I'm also an artist and I do a lot of writing, spoken word, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm this multifaceted individual with lots of stories to tell.
You are a completely multifaceted individual and you're just such an interesting person. I always absolutely love it when we can chat because the conversation takes a different, unexpected turn every time, and I love it. Okay, so we were talking about your axe that you have to grind. Tell us what that axe is.
Yes, I have an axe to grind around when we talk about leaders, particularly the middle management tier. I was leading a team back in the day in the travel industry, a team of 10 people. Absolutely loved it. I did feel at that time that there was so much pressure put on that kind of middle management where we had, all of the higher ups, the directors, senior directors, VPs making all these decisions, putting pressure down to say, you need to implement this change, you need to do this, you need to do that, etc. Whilst you have your team bringing up all these issues saying, this hasn't been resolved, we need this, we need that. And sometimes these two forces are at odds with each other. And then so you're trying to do your job. Often there's a lot there already. You're trying to obviously lead and grow and develop amazing people in your team. And whilst you're trying to handle all of the corporate politics and pressures that are being put on you. And then comes the EDI. And when I was in the EDI role, I was like, why aren't leaders doing more? We need to influence at the leadership level. But again, I feel like middle management is often missed. We go for senior leaders. We want senior leaders to commit and da da da. And we want individual contributors to be supported and feel like they can be themselves. And then in the middle, I used to say, I feel like we're the shit of the shit sandwich. Everything's our fault. And we have no time for anything, but we're supposed to be this perfect, unbiased robot in between that is able to make everybody happy and drive everything to be fairer and do all these amazing non-biased recruitment and all these things that we want to do. But it's just like really, really difficult. And that piece therefore leads to, I think, something that's really missing is compassion and self-compassion for that position.
Oh my goodness, what an angle to take. Because actually, so much of EDI training and so much of EDI work and consultancy and whatnot comes down to those middle managers, actually. And there's a huge amount of narrative around we've got to convince the most senior leaders, but actually, what about the managers? So, what pressures are managers facing then day to day?
Honestly, so much pressure. A lot of the time, managers end up in this position because they have been promoted as a result of being a wonderful individual contributor. And I have already some challenges to that because managing and being amazing at the day-to-day job are two completely different things. But that's often what happens. So you end up in a role where you haven't been trained. You've been promoted there. You may not even really want to be there, but it was more money and it looks good on the CV and all that kind of stuff. So there's a huge pressure in terms of like upskilling yourself by yourself most of the time because there's a lot of budget cuts in terms of manager training, upskilling, and all of that. You have then pressure in terms of the KPIs. So you need to hit certain metrics, and every day, every week, every month, depending on the organization and the culture and how it works, your director will be on your case saying, your team's doing this, your team's doing that. They need to be there in terms of the money they're bringing to the business. You need to get higher. It's always higher. No one's ever said, oh, this quota, take it easy. No, no, it's always higher with less, more with less, more with less. Then you have the big organizational changes that are coming. Okay, we're introducing like a new tool and your whole team needs to be trained up and you need to manage all of that. Or we're like changing policies there and you need to introduce this to your team and that's your team. And then you have all of the pressure from the team, which obviously, I mean, makes sense, right? You're in this position because you have the privilege of looking after people. But that obviously comes with its own challenges. They have, they might have personal struggles. They may struggle with the job. Some people are overperforming and bored. Some people are underperforming, and you need to find ways to motivate them and drive them into the role, or maybe help them to find something else. So you're trying to like cater on an individual basis for all of your team members. Then you're trying to create a culture in which they can be themselves and contribute. Then you're trying to implement all of the new changes and new ways, and then you're trying to achieve the targets overall as a team and metrics. And then you get the wonderful EDI team coming and saying, we need to do all this additional training and additional things. And sometimes it does feel like a pressure cooker. And look, again, I loved that job so much. Like I really love growing and developing people, and I think it's beautiful to have this kind of challenge. I just feel that when I'm hearing a lot of consultants or, people who haven't necessarily done the job of leading a large team, 10 people is not that big, by the way. Some people have like 200, hey, but usually they'll have a layer in between. But my point is like in a lot of the conversation, it's about, why aren't you doing this? And come on, you should do this. And you should. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of saying it feels like it's manager's fault when actually, I think if we approach the topic with a lot more compassion of saying, hey, like, I know that you're under a tremendous amount of pressure, like, how can we integrate EDI into what you're already doing in different ways? Because there are ways to do that, and integrating EDI practices in like the recruitment that you're already doing if you're growing your team, or in the management of the performance of individuals or team. Like there are ways that you can do it by putting it into day-to-day activities that are already happening, rather than feeling like something on top, which it shouldn't be, and it isn't anyway, right? Because our goal is equity across the board.
Oh my gosh, I feel stressed just having listened to you talking about that, because I remember when I was in that role and it was just, oh my gosh, it makes me want to just like loosen my neck binding. I was so stressed. I remember going on an away day with the CIO, who I reported into via another person. So I was in that middle management layer, and we'd had an away day, and then we had a couple of drinks afterwards, and he was like, oh, why are you so stressed all the time? Why are you so stressed? And I burst into, he's like, take a day off tomorrow. And I just burst into tears. I was like, oh my gosh, you don't understand. I can't take a day off. I have got so much work to do. Oh my gosh, it just brought me right back to that moment. I'd completely forgotten about that. That is really, really, really something that people just actually, when you're living in a theoretical world of, when you're out of the day to day and you're looking out from the outside in, going, you should do this, and this should be integrated, and this should be best practice, and etc. Actually, you forget about that they're on a treadmill running as fast as they possibly can. If you're hiring, or if you're trying to get stuff out the door just as fast as you can, you're going to be more inclined not to take a chance on someone that you're not 100% sure of when you're hiring. That like me bias is going to be like in the driving seat for sure, being like, right, you're exactly like me. I know you can do this. Let's just go. Or you've been recommended to me by someone in my trusted 10 circle. I'm just going to hire you because I know you can just hit the ground running. And you don't necessarily want to hear at that moment those what can feel like disruptions. Like, can I just challenge that? Or is there a better way of doing this when you're like changing as my CIO that I just referred to it, changing the engines on a jumbo jet while you're flying 100 miles an hour, which was the situation we were in. You don't really have that time to sit down and go, is there a better way of doing this? Is there a more effective way of doing this? What an angle to take. I'm loving this. So what can we do? How can we support them? What is the solution?
Yeah, when you were talking, I got this image of I don't know if you've seen it. It's like two people are pulling the cart and it's got square wheels, and then there's someone with a round wheel behind running and going like, you should try this, and they're like, we don't have time.
A
But
hundred
yeah,
percent. Yeah.
it's really that. And I've been on both ends. Like I've been in that position like you, where it was like I was pulling with the square wheels and and so stressed that, like you say, you just don't feel like you even have the mental capacity to consider things that are outside of the immediate burning issues. Because, and I used to say this all the time, I feel like I'm juggling so many, plates, and I just don't know which one's going to drop and if it's going to break when it drops and how bad the break is going to be and can we fix it later. I just that was the sensation at that moment, for sure. And especially I think when you are so passionate about doing the best for your team and for people around you, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself as it is. I know that personally for me, like that was, one of the things that was really difficult was I wasn't having any self-compassion towards myself. I was just like, I need to be this perfect leader. I need to let nobody down. I need every single person on my team to absolutely love the way that I lead them and manage them, etc. And that's unrealistic. And obviously, as we've said, there's all the other pressures on top of that as well. So yeah, I'm going on a tangent, ADHD brain, but my tangent was like, that perfectionism. Like, I'm not even sure humans are meant to be leading humans. Like, I'm not even sure that that's the case. Like, you just think we all react with a bit of, to authority, like to being told what to do. So I kind of, at one point in those positions, and I managed people for 10 years until now I'm obviously freelancing with my own business. But there were so many times when I was like, but my team, they know what to do. They don't want to hear from me about what to do. And I think that's one of the things that we can do is to remember that we're all humans and we're all adults. So to look at how can we empower our teams to self-lead, like lead themselves, because essentially when we are taking that position of, more of the manager telling rather than the manager serving, then I think that's when often we get in some difficult situations where we feel like we need to be involved in everything and have control over everything and do everything. Whereas actually coming back to, okay, my role as a manager is to serve my team. My team can do like 99% of the work that we have to do collectively. My role, my 80% of my role, 70 to 80% of my role is about serving them. And how can I best do that?
Do you want to
Sorry.
say that last bit, like the 70 to 80% of my role?
Um, yeah, 70 to 80% of my role as a leader is serving my team. And 90 to 99, even more percent of the actual work that he's doing can be done with the team. So I think one of the key parts, and it's really hard because especially when you've been promoted through the organization, there's that feeling of like, I can do it. It's just quicker if I just let me do it, or just let me tell you how to do it. But that gets in the way of the long term, freeing up some of that mind space to be able to stop and think, to be able to look at things like bias, things like systemic issues in the team, in the wider organization, to be able to even self-educate around all these topics because it's so interesting, but you're just not having the time because holding on to so many, I need to be involved in everything. I need to do all this stuff. So, okay, deep breath. What can I actually delegate and empower my team to self-lead and do on their own versus like then what really needs me, and that's usually serving the team. Obviously it's anything that's happening above to keep that in, rolling, but it's also the vision, like what are we going to do next, how are we going to shape our culture, and how are we going to make this the best place to work. And that was the question that often kept me up at night, but in a positive way. Like I was constantly thinking, how can we make this team, how can we make this office like a place where everybody wants to work because it's so awesome and they can really be themselves and enjoy it.
Yes, totally. I'm right here on this journey with you. I'm physiologically going on this journey with you. um, when you made that point about really brilliant individual contributors being promoted to managers with absolutely no training, that is always such a huge red flag for me. I once was looking after a team of 90 where there was individual, and because it was tech, it's always the absolutely outstanding individual contributors who have all this knowledge and they have just a deep understanding of the systems that you're working with. They get promoted to lead a team, and actually they were described by this company, which always, like, red flag for anyone who ever hears this, is player managers. So if you're being asked to hire someone and you're like, oh, we want them to be a player manager, so 70% playing, 30% managing, it just did not work. It just was absolutely horrendous, and the culture was just so bad. It was just every person for themselves. Everyone felt like they wanted this independence. It was a really weird situation where they talked really passionately about, we don't have managers and we're independent, etc. But then when you looked at the things that were going wrong, it was all because all of the people lacked support. They didn't have any. When I came in, I met with so many people, and the question that I asked them was, who's got your back here? Who do you go to? And they were like, oh, I don't know. And they just talked like, we don't have managers, we're a meritocracy, we do this, we're also independent, and we don't want bosses, and we're not traditional, etc. But then when you said, who's got your back, they were like, I don't know, nobody, I guess. And it's just like, that is just bad, isn't it? So when you're talking about freeing up a lot of managers' time to actually focus on the team, that was the best leadership role I ever had, where my entire role was making sure this team was absolutely smashing it. And the way we did it was, I just removed all the hierarchy, and I got in a lot of trouble for this because we were just collaborative. We were just a team. So we would sit down and we would go, right, we are all equals here. We didn't even need to say that. We just were. What are we going to do about this problem? Right, we've got this issue. What are our ideas? How are we going to solve it? Yeah, that's an issue and that's a leadership thing. Let me take that one on. I will go to that and I will fight for that particular battle. But in this problem here, how are we going to solve it? And we all got together and did it, rather than all that pressure being on the leader's shoulders to solve the problems and then dish out solutions to the team. They don't want that either.
No, exactly. And it's a massive pet peeve of mine, the whole idea of like, oh, because you're great at the day job, then let's promote you. That it can work sometimes. I mean, there are definitely individuals that are, interested in growing in this area, and that's the key point. Like, does the person actually want to do what a leader role is about? Because if you're not interested in actually working with people, growing people, then it's very unlikely to work, But if you're interested, whether you've been an individual contributor, done something completely different, management skills, leadership skills, you can learn those 100%. And I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, we don't want to be managers anymore. We all want to be leaders. Like, I think there are skills from both sides that we need, and it's like developing your own toolkit, and like you said, your own style. Like, you had your own style. You said, I don't want to have any kind of hierarchy or anything. I want people to be equal and to co-create solutions together. So I think it's also important, like, to define your own style. But yeah, I think we really confuse like being great at a job and therefore being ready to be a manager. The first step to be ready to be a manager or a leader is to want it. Then the second step is obviously going to be about education. And I think the first step is a lot of self-awareness and that development of like your own style based on, observing other people, learning like what find out and practicing as well. And we all make mistakes, guaranteed. But I think the more we can be transparent also with the people in our team to say, hey, like I'm learning and give me some feedback. It's uncomfortable, don't get me wrong. Every time someone says feedback, I feel like I have a reaction, like defensive reaction. But it's so helpful, like if you're actually prepared to sit down and listen and be like, okay, how can I be the best leader that I can be for the people in my team? Because I'm a leader in service. I walk with the team. I don't walk ahead of the team. For me, that's the key point of how I envision it.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely, that is definitely my style of leadership, because otherwise, not only is it so much pressure on your shoulders, but it's also really lonely. And also, you know that your team probably secretly hates you. Like they probably think you're
Yes.
a real
But I
shit.
think that you can't escape it. Like, as much as I've wanted to be that leader that everybody likes, I think that again, like we're humans and we're not really meant to be led by some other human. And we have resistance towards that. And obviously, again, we'll gel or connect with different people in different ways. And they will be people where it just doesn't work. I've had that experience as a leader. It's heartbreaking because I wanted so bad to be this person who can, help everyone develop and be their best selves and all that. And there was an instance where I just had to admit, like, I'm just not the right fit for this individual. Like, it's just not working for either of us. And that's really hard to do. And I think, again, as a leader, that's something you need to be prepared to do, like constantly challenging yourself, looking in the mirror, saying, am I actually the right person to lead this particular individual, this particular team, and how can I get myself there? Or sometimes there's a case where it's like it's just not going to work, and it's better for this person to find a better role, a different team, something that will, work for them. So I do think that to a degree, you have to accept the idea of being disliked as a leader. There will be people who have something to say about something you did or something you said, or because we're not perfect, there will always be
No.
something to say. And because you're in a position of authority, there is that element of like, we got to complain about something, we got to federate as a team, and why not the boss, let's do it. So it's
Oh my
I
gosh.
think
I feel
it
like that
happens.
there's like an element of self-growth within you that gets you to the point where you can get to that place where you go, do you know what? We are just not right for each other, and that is okay. That's so you will be happy somewhere else, and the team will be more performative, performant, um, without you in it. Like quite honestly, and but there's also that moment of self-growth where you're like, I have outgrown this position. I need to go. When you recognize those behaviors and those moments that you have where when it's happened more than once, you're like, it's time for me to go. I've outgrown this. Like all the problems are solved, the stress and the chaos. And for me, it's when the stress and the chaos is gone and everything's working perfectly. And then I'm like, it's time for me to go. I need to go now. I need to go to the next place that needs me, like Mary Poppins. I also
Oh
wonder.
yeah, I'm the same as you. Like as soon as it gets to an operational state where things become repetitive because they're working well, and it's just like do it even better. Yay, do it even better. Now do it even better. Like the same thing. Then I'm like, okay, bored. Bye. Next one.
I know,
And then
me
next
too.
challenge, like something new that I don't know, that is out of my depth. And there's an element, I think, of the ADHD coming in. There's an element of being that multi-potentialite type person with lots of things that you're interested in, and therefore just wanting to keep growing and learning, like you said. I think one thing that I'm just realizing that I forgot to mention around the previous topic of the high performing individual contributors being automatically promoted to managers, or naturally promoted to managers, and the problems around that. I think one thing that we didn't mention is the importance of creating an alternative pathway for those people that are credible, extraordinary individual contributors so that they can keep growing in seniority, in competency, in being challenged, and in salary and compensation and everything that comes with it without necessarily having to manage people. And I think that's a very fundamental organizational change and shift that we must make. And some organizations are doing that. There are some organizations, particularly in tech, where you can be that tech incredible talent that is going to do all these incredible things on the system, the technology, whatever it is that you're working on, without necessarily having to manage people. And that doesn't mean that you're not growing and becoming more senior along the way as well.
Yes, I've seen that work really, really well where and you actually, when you work with people who are technically absolutely brilliant but have absolutely no people skills whatsoever, and you can't really introduce them to stakeholders because they'll say exactly what's on their mind, which I personally love when it's directed at me.
Same.
I'm like, this is a terrible idea and it's going to break everything and it's rubbish. Can't do it. I love that because it's so black and white. Whereas there are certain stakeholders where you're like, I'm not going to put you in front of them because if you tell them their idea is really dumb, they're going to get pissed. Their ego is not going to be able to handle it.
But that's also something we must change, right? And it's a big piece of the work I'm doing around neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And how do we create this neuro-inclusive culture inside the organization, but also with our shareholders and stakeholders, where yes, you can show up and speak very directly, and that can be heard. There can be a space for that as well. Because I think why should we keep people away from the room where they have the knowledge? They're the one, and we put someone in between to share a message because they need
can't
water
handle
with
it.
they need water with the pill to swallow.
Oh my gosh, honestly, that used to be a huge part of my role, was translating or just being that go-between person who could take the message as it came out and go and find a nice way to deliver it to stakeholders. But actually, that is really silly, isn't it, when you think about it? Like, come on, you need to be able to hear the facts, and that has got to be okay. But people are not there yet. If you are a person who is listening to this and you have lots of middle managers and you don't have the budget or the support to be able to get them training, because with a lot of organizations, they've got a huge management layer and they just would not be able to afford, especially today in what is a very tough financial climate for a lot of organizations, especially SMEs. What would you recommend? What have you seen done really well for free or cheap?
Well, I think my first question would be, where is the money going though? Because if you're a big organization, there's money coming in somewhere. So there is an element of like prioritization, right? And this gets deprioritized, thinking, well, it's just people, they can just figure out with their team and just whatever. Without looking at the cost, the amount of people leaving. So looking at retention metrics, looking at the amount of people you're having to recruit to replace those people and how costly it is to train them up. And then if they leave again because your turnover rates are super high. I mean, I've worked in organizations where we're talking about a 20-25% turnover rate. That's just like, whoa, turnover is good in small amounts because you want people, when they've outgrown the roles, the organization, to move on to better, greater things for them. And then you get, new people, new ideas. There is a range for sure. So looking at that and the cost of that, and then thinking, okay, is there an issue around how we create that culture from a management standpoint that makes it actually worthwhile and valuable, seeing the value in spending the money in management training. So that would be the first thing I would first challenge, whether truly is there no money or are we not seeing the value of it. And then really truly, if it's like, like in a startup, say, for example, a growing startup, but really every single penny counts in developing whatever the product or the service is. I think there's tons out there that's readily available. The best thing, to be honest, bring the managers in, ask them, what skills and knowledge do you each have, and how can we create some way of sharing these skills? Do we do like a monthly learning session where one person says, I think I'm pretty damn good at giving feedback. One person says, I'm really confident in communicating in public. One person, and then you look at, okay, let's rotate and let's basically train each other, because we'll all have strengths and we'll all have areas where, oh, we're not sure, we've never heard about it, we don't know. The second thing would be a book club. Previous organization, we were encouraged, to read books on leadership. And our senior director, he was a big avid reader, and he would, say, this month it's not mandatory, but it's optional. But then you get together and discuss it. So it's your senior director. So if you're not there, it's pretty obvious. Or if you're there and you haven't read it, it's pretty obvious. So doing a bit of a book club with leadership related books and coaching related books, I think is another idea. And the third one, shameless plug, powered by diversity, is not expensive, and you can get access to amazing and I'm not just saying that because Kat is here, I really mean it. You get access to like amazing sessions, and you can share with other companies the cost, and that's, I think, really helpful because it brings it really way down. And again, it's like got that added value of having lived experience, like people talking from, things that they've gone through, they've, really truly lived in their own personal or professional experience. So I think there's a lot of value in that. So that would be my three things.
I absolutely love those ideas. I really love it. Before we go, so I love the idea of learning from your peers and your colleagues who are just really good in other areas. Like I have people who, when I need to do certain things, I will go to them for a bit of cheerleading and just be like, right, how would you word this? How would you say this? What, judge me up, come on, give me some of your stuff, because it doesn't come naturally to me, and that is okay, because there are loads of things that come naturally to me that I am really good at, and that I judge other people up with those things. So I think that's brilliant. To close, what would be your standout book that you would use to start off that book club? While you're thinking, I'll give you mine. So I was about 25, and I was just about to be sent on my first leadership course, because I have been an individual contributor who's really good at my job and got promoted, and thought, this is the way to do it. Of course I need people, because I needed the people for the status, and I needed to be like, I manage a team. And it was that, I was so young, and I had grown up in that world where you get promoted, you're a manager, how many people report into you, etc. And I was like, oh gosh. And I got my first 360 feedback, and I was sent on a leadership course because it was horrendous and they all hated me and I was terrible. But thank goodness I went on that leadership course, because what I realized was I had been assimilating for the whole time. I had just looked at who was around me and gone, well, you do it that way, I'm going to do it that way. And it was completely inauthentic, and everyone saw straight through it. And I was absolutely awful. And I really actually want to have a reunion with that original team and thank them so much for being so honest in my 360 feedback, because I came back off my first week on the leadership course and I was like, I'm so sorry that you have had to experience me. Terrible. Oh, bless him. But one of the first books I read on this leadership course was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I hadn't read any of the books. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to read one. And that was the thinnest one. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to read this one. And it changed my working life. And I have never looked back, because it's just so common sense, but it just completely dismisses all that rubbish feedback that you've had from bosses in the past who are like, you need to take a harder line, you need to be like this, you need to be like this, you need to do that, people telling you, and you just take it on so much, and you're like, okay, well, I will. Actually, that whole book is about how to be yourself, and it's about how to treat people in a way that's going to make them receptive to your ideas and work with you and just be a genuine nice human being. So that would be my recommendation to start off.
I love that. It's so hard because I have so many. Can I do a top three?
Yeah.
So in the top three would be Powerful by Patty McCord, who was at Netflix, and it's a completely different like way of leading. It's all around empowering people and giving people freedom. And I don't necessarily agree with absolutely everything in the way that they did it, but I think it's just so thought-provoking. And again, it's about reading these books and trying to find your own style, just like you did. You tried with one style and you learned something else. You tried something, oh, this works much better. Okay, and like adjusting along the way. The second one is called Radical Candor. And this is much more around like having some of these more challenging conversations, giving people feedback, but also valuing people for their own like unique strengths. Like you'll have your rock stars and your shooting stars. And that's something that I completely like, I had no idea. I was all about because I was like you, like pretty, ambitious, and I want to be a manager and I want to do this and I want to do that. And this is the way to grow. So I was always at the very beginning of my leadership career, I tended to gravitate and to look for these shooting stars, people like that who had lots of ambition, who wanted to grow very quickly in and out of my team and go and keep moving. And I learned through this book to also value those rock stars who are going to stay in their role maybe for 10 years, and they're going to be great contributors. They're never going to like shine super bright, but they're never going to let you down either. And I completely undervalued them for the beginning of my career. So that book really changed that for me and really helped me to have a more stable and steady team, and also to give my attention and my growth and my energy to everyone rather than focusing in a certain direction. And it's sometimes you have to call yourself out a bit and be like uncomfortable with yourself and be like, damn, I did that just like you. And the final one is a very short one. It's a very practical one. I had to Google the title because I couldn't remember. It's a pretty long one. The Coaching Habit: Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. And that's got very practical coaching questions. I love that because sometimes when I'm like, well, I really just want to tell this person what to do, but it's not going to work. I know I need to. So I just go to the book and I'm like, okay, what kind of questions can I ask to, get them to think about potential solutions and not put myself and my way of thinking in the way of them finding, being empowered to find whatever solution that they can come up with. So that's my top three. But there's so many more. As I'm talking, I'm like, oh, there was.
I know we should start a book club of our own. We should start a Powered by Diversity book club, shouldn't we, for managers? And then get them all together and tell them all the terrible
I love
things that we
that.
have done that have happened to us in the past. Oh my gosh, thank you so
And I
much.
think that's really needed. And sorry to interrupt. I just think, again, back to the point of the feeling like the shit of the shit sandwich. Like, I think a coaching group of managers, like helping each other, practicing difficult conversations. Like, I had that at one point in my career where it was like four of us and we would get together and practice, oh, I'm going to have this conversation with a team member or something. It was all hypothetical. But yeah, it was just like so helpful to be able to have that and also get that compassion, because often you don't get thank you or anything. You're that shit of the sandwich.
Yeah.
So helping each other, creating those smaller groups to do that, I think that's really, really helpful.
Brilliant. Well, this has been absolutely incredible. It took all sorts of twists and turns that I hadn't expected, and they're my favorite ones. I know they're not necessarily your favorite ones, but I love it. Thank you so much, Solène. This has been fantastic. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to chat?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm someone who really likes to be prepared usually. Yes, but actually I really enjoyed this. So thank you for getting me out of my comfort zone. If people want to get in touch, I am Solène Anglaret on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram at B Beyond Borders. That's BE Beyond Borders. That's my handle. And I also have a website by the same name, so www.bbeyondborders.com. Yeah, I love getting in touch with people, talking about all things neurodiversity, mental health, leadership, innovation, and culture. Those are my topics. Because we didn't even touch on the fact that I'm in Dubai. Anyway.
Well, we're gonna have to we're gonna have to follow up on this.
Part two.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.